The room held 11 engineers on a Tuesday morning when Marcus Webb walked out of it. Nobody touched their coffee. Nobody looked at their screens. They watched him unclip his badge from the chest pocket of his gray work shirt. The same shirt he had worn every Tuesday for 3 years, the collar washed thin, the left cuff frayed where it caught the edge of his workbench, and set it on the table with the same precise care he gave everything he touched. He had said one sentence before he stood up. He had said it quietly, without defense, without anger, in the particular tone of a man who has decided that a warning is all he owes a room that has already decided not to listen. The secondary compensator in Bay 7 has a handmade bracket. If you remove the housing without releasing it first, you will crack the resonance chamber. Nobody wrote it down. Marcus walked to the door. He paused once, not to look back, but to adjust the strap of his canvas bag where it had slid off his shoulder. Then he was gone. Diane Cho had been watching him from the far end of the conference table. She was the only one still looking at the door after it closed. She was 31 years old, 3 years into her role as Junior Systems Coordinator at Aldrin Precision Engineering, and she had spent most of those 3 years paying careful attention to Marcus Webb without being able to fully explain why. She would spend the next 6 days understanding. That morning had begun like any other. Marcus was at the kitchen counter at 5:47, pressing the heel of his hand against the lid of a thermos to test the seal. His daughter Nora was still asleep, which meant she was not yet asleep. She was in that phase of mourning she called hiding, where she lay in her bed with her eyes open and the blanket pulled to her chin, waiting for the right moment to reappear in the world. He knew this because she had explained it to him in great detail at age 5, and he had taken it seriously, as he took most things she said. On the counter beside the thermos sat a small stuffed dog, gray-brown, floppy at the ears. One button eye replaced years ago with a piece of black felt that had been sewn in with yellow thread because yellow was the only thread available that night. The dog's name was Compass. Nora had named it herself at age 3, which Marcus had later understood was her mother's doing. Claire had spent the last weeks of her pregnancy reading Nora picture books about explorers, and something from those evenings had traveled with the child into the world and attached itself to a stuffed dog before anyone fully realized it. Claire had died when Nora was 14 months old, a brain aneurysm. Fast, unannounced, the kind of thing that arrives without prelude and leaves without explanation. And the only honest thing to say about it was that it happened, and then the rest of life had to be arranged around the fact of it. Marcus had arranged it. That was the word for what he had done. He heard Nora's feet on the floor before he saw her. 2 socked footsteps, deliberate, the sound of someone testing whether the morning was safe. She appeared in the kitchen doorway in her blue pajamas with the small white stars, compass tucked under her left arm, hair pressed flat on one side. She was 7 years old, and she looked at her father with the direct, unhurried assessment she applied to most things. "Is it a long day or a regular day?" she asked. Marcus considered this. "I'm not sure yet," he said. Nora accepted this with the patience of someone who had learned that her father's honest answers were always more useful than reassuring ones. She crossed to the table and sat down, and pulled Compass into her lap. Marcus set her juice in front of her. He did not elaborate. Neither did she. He picked up his bag. He checked the lock twice on the way out. He did not know yet that he would not be coming back. Diane had worked alongside Marcus for 3 years without knowing his last name for the first 4 months. He had introduced himself once, at the initial team meeting, and she had written Marcus on her notepad and then spent the following weeks filing him under Quiet One in her mental index of colleagues. He was not quiet, she had come to understand. He was precise. The distinction mattered. When Marcus spoke in a technical meeting, he said exactly what needed saying and then stopped. He never elaborated for the sake of appearing thorough. He never restated a point someone else had already made. In an industry where technical meetings were often exercises in demonstrating how much each person knew, Marcus operated as though the meeting itself were a machine that should run as efficiently as possible. No wasted parts. She had noticed his hands first. They were the hands of someone who worked with them, not desk smooth, not office soft. There were small scars at the knuckle of his right forefinger that had the particular flatness of healed work injuries, the kind that happen fast and don't require a hospital. When he held a technical drawing, the drawing didn't flutter. He held it with the same pressure a musician uses to hold an instrument. Firm enough to be certain, light enough not to damage. She had noticed also the small canvas bag he brought every day. Not a briefcase, not a backpack, a canvas bag with a worn strap and a brass clasp that he opened and closed with the same motion every time. She had never seen inside it. She thought about all of this on the Tuesday afternoon after he left, when the call came in from the Bay 7 floor, the Aldrin Precision Engineering Facility in Columbus, Ohio, occupied a converted material block in the Franklinton neighborhood, 6 minutes from the downtown ring and 3 minutes from the coffee shop where Mark Mars bought his Tuesday coffee in a paper cup he refilled at the office machine 3 times before noon. The facility manufactured precision alignment housings for aerospace components. Not the components themselves, but the housings that held the components in alignment under load, under heat, under the specific vibration profiles generated at altitude. It was the kind of work that nobody mentioned at dinner parties, and that stopped working, correctly, the consequences unfolded at 37,000 feet. The company's largest active contract was with Hargrove Aerospace Systems, a mid-tier defense and commercial contractor with a 17-month delivery timeline and penalty clauses that triggered at 23 days of delay. The contract was worth $41 million. The delivery date was 9 weeks away. Aldrin's CEO was a woman named Catherine Price. She had been in the role for 11 months, brought in from a financial services background to restructure what the board had decided was an organization with excellent technical capability and poor capital management. She was sharp, fast, and serious. She had also, in 11 months, not yet fully learned the difference between a management problem and an engineering problem, a distinction that Marcus had understood was coming before she had arrived. The person who had helped ensure she didn't learn it faster was the company's COO, a man named Raymond Kraft. Raymond Kraft was 53 years old and had been with Aldrin for 19 years. He had the easy authority of someone who had waited out 4 CEOs and fully expected to wait out a 5th. He wore good suits in a facility where everyone else wore technical clothing, which was either a habit or a statement, and Diane had spent 2 years deciding it was deliberately both. He positioned himself between Catherine and the engineering floor with the efficiency of someone managing a border crossing. Information moved through Raymond before it reached Catherine. Raymond decided what was relevant. Diane had watched him do this, quietly, for a long time. What she had not known, what none of them had known, on the Tuesday morning Marcus walked out, was what Raymond Kraft had done with the 2 years before Catherine arrived. She would learn that later. What mattered first was Bay 7. The call came at 2:14 in the afternoon. One of the floor supervisors, a man named Gil Torres, reported that the Hargrove Housing Assembly in Bay 7 had developed an irregular vibration signature during stress testing. Not catastrophic, not dramatic. The kind of thing that showed up as a number in the wrong column on a diagnostic printout and made experienced engineers go very still. Diane was at her desk when the call came through to the systems floor. She watched 3 senior engineers pull up the Bay 7 schematics. She watched them study the vibration data. She watched their faces. She had seen that expression before. It was the expression of people confronting something they recognize is important but cannot place. One of the engineers, a man named Sutton who had 15 years in aerospace components, ran the diagnostic again. The number did not change. He ran it a 3rd time. It still did not change. "Pull the secondary housing panel," he said. Nobody moved for a moment. Diane thought about what Marcus had said at the table. His voice had not been alarmed. It had been informative, the way a person gives directions in a city they know extremely well. "Turn left before the bridge. It matters." "Wait," she said. Sutton turned. Marcus Webb said something this morning, before he left. About Bay 7. About a secondary compensator with a handmade bracket. He said if you remove the housing without releasing it first, you'll crack the resonance chamber. Sutton looked at her with the particular expression of someone being told something inconvenient by a person they would prefer not to have noticed it. Marcus Webb was dismissed this morning, he said. I know, Diane said. He still said it. Nobody released the bracket. They removed the housing. The resonance chamber cracked along a fault line so precise it would later be described in the engineering report as almost engineered, as though the fracture had been designed to wait. The vibration signature tripled in 12 minutes. By 3 o'clock, the entire Bay 7 assembly was red-tagged. By 4, a second assembly in Bay 9 had returned a related anomaly. Sutton called in 2 additional engineers from the Cincinnati facility. They arrived by 6 and spent 90 minutes reviewing documentation that, as they eventually established, did not contain what they needed. The handmade bracket Marcus had referenced did not appear in any version of the Bay 7 schematics currently in the system. What none of them could have understood from the outside, was that the bracket had been added 4 years earlier during a critical fault correction, documented in a field log that had since been archived, and that the archive had been restructured the previous year during a records consolidation project that Raymond Kraft had overseen personally. Catherine Price came to the floor at 7:18 that evening. In a dark blazer she had not taken off since 6 that morning. She stood at the edge of the Bay 7 assembly area and looked at the red-tagged housing unit and said nothing for a long moment. Then she asked a question she had not asked before. She turned to Sutton and said, not as a performance of authority, but as a genuine inquiry, "What don't you know?" Sutton looked at the floor. Then he said, "We don't know why the bracket is there. We don't know how it works. And we don't know how to safely remove it without a fracture model for the resonance chamber geometry." A lamp on the east wall of the bay flickered once and steadied. "Who designed that bracket?" Catherine said. Nobody in the room answered immediately. Then Gil Torres, who had been quiet in the corner for 40 minutes, said, "Marcus Webb has been running Bay 7 maintenance for 3 years." Catherine looked at him. "Where is Marcus Webb?" The silence that followed was the particular silence of a room full of people who already know an answer and are deciding how to say it. It was Diane who spoke. "He was dismissed this morning," she said. Raymond brought the order to the 11 o'clock meeting. Something crossed Catherine Price's face, not the performed composure of a CEO managing information in public. Something actual. She looked at the cracked housing unit. She looked at the schematics on the wall that did not contain the bracket. Then she walked out of the bay and did not speak to anyone until she reached the corridor. What she did in the corridor, Diane would find out later, was call Raymond Kraft and ask a direct question about what had been archived and when. Raymond answered with precision and fluency. He always answered with precision and fluency. What he did not answer was the question she had actually asked, and Catherine Price was sharp enough, by that point in the evening, to notice the gap. Diane drove home at 9:15. She sat in her car in the parking lot for 11 minutes before she started the engine. She thought about Marcus at the table that morning. The badge set down with care, the one sentence. The fact that he had not repeated it, had not argued, had not done anything except warn them once and then leave. She thought about all the meetings she had attended in 3 years where Marcus had said something that proved, afterward, to have been exactly right. She thought about how often those statements had been received by Raymond. Nodded at, not recorded, sometimes attributed later to other names in summary documents. She thought about the field log. She thought about the archive restructure. She thought, I have been watching this man for 3 years, and I did not see it clearly until the day he was gone. She started the engine and drove home. Marcus had made dinner for 2 by 6, grilled chicken, rice, a salad assembled with the kind of structural attention that showed up in everything he built, the greens layered by weight, the tomatoes sliced to a consistent width. Nora ate across from him with Compass on the seat beside her, fork in one hand, the other hand resting on the dog's back as though checking that it was still warm. She had not asked him about his day. She had asked him at 5:53 when he came through the door if everything was okay. He had looked at her for a moment. "Not yet," he said. She had nodded with the patience she had been practicing since she was 5 and gone back to her drawing. They ate. Afterward, she helped him clear the table, which was her contribution to the domestic operations, established by mutual agreement when she was 6, and she had taken it as seriously as she took Compass. She carried her plate and her glass and his glass to the counter, and then sat back down and opened her book. Marcus washed the dishes by hand. He thought about the resonance chamber. He thought about the bracket, which he had fabricated himself from a steel flat bar on a Sunday afternoon 4 years ago, when the alignment fault had shown up in testing and the expedited parts order would have taken 9 days, and there were 7 days left on the delivery window. He had documented it in the field log with a diagram and a torque specification. He had filed the log himself. He had not thought about it again because it had worked perfectly for 4 years. He was not surprised they had cracked the chamber. He had seen it the moment they didn't write it down. At 8:45 his phone rang. He did not recognize the number. He almost did not answer. "Mr. Webb," the voice said. "My name is Catherine Price. I'm the CEO of Aldrin Precision Engineering. I owe you an apology, and I owe you an explanation, and I'm going to give you both. But first I need to ask you something, and I need you to understand that I'm asking you as a person, not as a company." Marcus stood at the kitchen window. The street below was doing what streets do at 8:45 on a Tuesday. A few lights, a dog being walked, someone's television visible through a window across the way. "Ask," he said. "I need to understand the Bay 7 bracket. The housing is cracked. We can't safely reconstruct without the original geometry, and I'm told the documentation is gone." "It's not gone," Marcus said. "It's been archived." A pause. "Raymond Kraft managed the archive restructure." "I know," Marcus said. Another pause. Longer. The kind that meant something was being understood that had not been understood before. "Will you come in tomorrow?" Catherine said. Marcus was quiet for a moment. He looked at the window. He looked at the street. He thought about Nora at the table with Compass, her book open, turning pages with the focused calm of a child who had learned to occupy herself well, because her father had taught her that being able to sit quietly with a thing was one of the more useful skills a person could have. He thought about the Hargrove contract. He thought about the 11 people who would have to call their supervisors in the morning if the contract failed. He thought about Gil Torres, who had worked the Bay 7 floor for 8 years, and had never once been the cause of a problem he hadn't also fixed. "I'll come in," Marcus said, "but I have conditions." He stated 3 of them. The first was that the field log archive be audited by an external party, not by anyone currently in a management position. The second was that Gil Torres and 2 other floor technicians be named as primary technical leads on the Hargrove recovery. Not external consultants, not him. Him in an advisory capacity only, and only until the chamber was stable. The third was that the audit findings be shared with the full engineering floor, not summarized by the executive team. Catherine said, "Done." Marcus said, "I'll be there at 7. He put the phone down. Nora was looking at him from across the room, book open in her lap, Compass resting against her knee. She had her mother's eyes, steady, observational, the kind that noticed things and filed them without comment until the right moment arrived. "Was that work?" she said. "Yes. Are you going back?" "Tomorrow morning." Nora considered this. "Did they say sorry?" "Yes," Marcus said. She nodded once. She went back to her book. Catherine Price had not been sleeping. She had been in her office at 11:47 when she finally opened the folder that Raymond Kraft's assistant, not Raymond, had sent to her private email address at 9:31 that evening. The assistant's name was Frank Medina, and he had worked at Aldrin for 7 years, and his covering email said only, "I thought you should see the original archive index before the restructure. I made a copy because I thought someone might need it." She read the index. She found the field log entry from 4 years ago. She found the diagram, the torque specification, the annotation in Marcus's handwriting that said, "Secondary compensator bracket, non-standard, fabricated on-site. See attached geometry for removal procedure." Then she kept reading. Because Frank Medina had not just sent the field log. He had sent 17 documents, the original index and 16 supporting files, that together described something she had not been told, had not been given the information to understand, and which Raymond Kraft had been constructing very carefully for the previous 4 years. The full picture took her 2 hours to assemble. She did it alone, with a cold cup of coffee, and a notepad she had turned to the back pages so she could write, without looking at anything she had already written. What Raymond had done was not impulsive. It was the work of someone who understood institutional systems well enough to know which documents traveled and which ones stayed in place. He had not stolen money. He had stolen something smaller and harder to see: credit, attribution, the record of who had done what and when. Marcus Webb had designed the core alignment geometry that underpinned every housing Aldrin had produced for the last 4 years. Not in an official capacity. As part of his maintenance role, a role Raymond had structured specifically to keep Marcus's contributions off the primary engineering record. Marcus had been brought in 11 years ago as a senior design engineer. Raymond had been COO. When the company restructured following a failed expansion, Raymond had made the case to the board that the senior design position should be eliminated and the work absorbed into maintenance and quality roles. The board had agreed. Marcus had been one of 3 senior engineers who had accepted the maintenance roles rather than leave. The others had left within 2 years. Marcus had stayed. He had stayed, and he had kept doing the same work, at a maintenance technician's rate of pay, and the design outputs had gone into the product record without his name because maintenance technicians did not receive design credits. Raymond had not changed this by accident. He had structured it. He had also, Catherine found in the documents, been submitting the alignment geometry to a holding company he controlled as proprietary methodology, which the holding company had quietly licensed to 2 smaller manufacturers. The licensing fees had been credited as consulting income. Catherine sat with this for a long time. Outside the office window, Columbus was conducting its late-night operations in the particular way of Midwestern cities. Efficiently, without drama, the freight traffic moving through the Franklinton Loop with the steadiness of something that had been doing it a long time and expected to keep going. She was not thinking about the company. She was thinking about a man who had sat in a conference room that morning with 11 other people and said one sentence and set down his badge and walked out without argument. She was thinking about how she had not asked a single question. She thought, "I looked at what he was wearing, and I looked at what Raymond told me, and I made a decision before I was in possession of the facts. That is the specific and unambiguous mistake I made. And I made it because somebody had arranged for me to make it. And because I was moving fast enough that I didn't see the arrangement." She was not the first person who had underestimated Marcus Webb. She did not intend to be the last. Marcus arrived at 7 o'clock. He came through the main entrance, not the side door, and he had Nora with him, because school did not start until 8:30, and the drive from their apartment in Clintonville to Aldrin, and then to Franklin Elementary, was a workable geometry if you left at 7 and didn't hit construction on the 315. Nora had compass under her arm. She was wearing her green jacket with the wooden buttons, and she looked at the Aldrin facility with the same focused inventory she applied to all new places. Not impressed, not unimpressed, simply recording. Diane was at her desk when Marcus came through the glass doors. She watched him sign in at the front desk. She watched the receptionist hand him a visitor badge, not an employee badge, a visitor badge which meant Catherine's office had processed his return as temporary consulting, which was either a legal precaution or a careful signal, and Diane suspected it was both. Nora stood beside her father and looked around the lobby. She looked at the engineering floor, visible through the internal glass. She looked at the display case near the entrance that held photographs of Aldrin projects and awards and press clippings, the kind of case every manufacturing company maintained to remind its employees what their work added up to. She looked at the display case for a long time. Then she turned to the woman behind the desk and said, very politely, "Is my dad's name on any of those?" The woman behind the desk looked at the display case. Then she looked at Nora. Then she looked at Marcus. Marcus was looking at the floor. His face was very still. "Not yet," Diane said from across the room. Nora turned toward the voice. She looked at Diane with the direct assessment she gave everyone. Then she said, "Are you going to fix that?" Diane had not planned to say what she said next. It came out before she had decided to say it, which was unusual for her. "Yes," she said, "I am." Nora seemed to find this satisfactory. She turned back to her father and tucked Compass more firmly under her arm and said, "I need to go to school." Marcus looked down at her. Something in his face that Diane had not seen in 3 years, not relief, not emotion named, but the specific quality of a man who is being seen by the one person whose opinion he has decided to deserve. "I'll take you," he said. He signed the visitor log. He handed Nora's backpack back to her. He looked at Diane across the lobby with a look that was brief and specific and did not require language. Then he walked his daughter to the car and drove her to school. He was back by 8:47. He went directly to Bay 7. What happened in the next 9 days Diane observed from close proximity because Catherine had asked her to coordinate the technical documentation, and Diane had said yes before she finished the sentence. Marcus worked the way she had always watched him work. Without announcement, without performance, without explaining himself unless someone asked a direct question. He reconstructed the bracket geometry from memory and from the original field notes. He produced a removal procedure in 3 pages, hand-drawn, with annotations in the margin in handwriting so precise it looked typeset. Gil Torres worked beside him, and what Diane noticed was that Marcus deferred to Gil on anything that had changed in Bay 7 since his field log was archived. He asked questions, he updated his notes, he did not assume. On the 4th day, the resonance chamber alignment was stable enough to proceed. On the 7th day, the housing passed stress testing. On the 9th day, the Hargrove delivery timeline was intact. Raymond Kraft had been asked to take administrative leave on the 2nd day. He arrived at the facility at 7:30 in the morning and was met in the parking lot by Catherine and 2 members of the external audit team she had engaged the previous evening. Raymond's composure held. It had always held. It was the composure of someone who had spent 19 years inside an organization and believed his institutional knowledge was his protection. He said, as he was escorted to the conference room, "This is a gross overreaction to an administrative dispute over archiving standards." Nobody responded. The door closed. The audit began. His name appeared in 3 more documents before the week was out. The second document connected the licensing income to a subsidiary that had been positioned carefully to receive it without appearing in Aldrin's financial disclosures. The third document then established that the methodology described in the license agreement was specifically the alignment geometry that Marcus Webb had originated. Raymond's departure from the company was finalized on a Thursday afternoon. He left through the side entrance, not the main one, with a box he had been permitted to collect from his office. He said nothing to anyone he passed. The side door closed behind him. That was all. Diane wrote her own report independently. She submitted it to Catherine, and also to the external auditor, and also to the Engineering Records Committee she had asked Catherine to convene. The report did not characterize Raymond's conduct or speculate about motive. It documented, in specific and chronological terms, what had been removed from the record, where it had gone, and what the accurate record should contain. The accurate record, once it was amended, included Marcus Webb's name on every design output to which his work had contributed. There were 23 of them over 4 years. The amendment was made without ceremony, without press release, without announcement to the floor. It was simply done. The records reflected what had been true. That was enough. Marcus was offered the senior design director position. He asked Catherine for 2 days to think. When he called back, he said, "I'd like to take it on one condition." Catherine said, "Name it." The position gets restructured so that maintenance technicians can submit design contributions to the primary record directly, with their own names, not through the engineering department. Directly. "Done," Catherine said. "One more thing," he said. "Yes. Gil Torres gets a senior technician credit on the Hargrove project. He held that floor together for 9 days without the documentation he needed. That gets recorded." Catherine said, "It already is." There was a pause. Then Marcus said, "Then yes." On a Saturday morning 3 weeks after all of it, Diane drove to the Franklin Park Conservatory because she had not been outside in 9 days, and she needed to walk somewhere that had nothing to do with engineering tolerances. She was standing in front of a glass panel, looking at a cactus arrangement when her phone buzzed with a message from Catherine. "He starts Monday. Thought you should know. Thank you for the report." It mattered. Diane put her phone in her pocket and stood there for a moment. She thought about the Tuesday morning at the conference table. She thought about the badge set down with care. She thought about 3 years of watching a man do work that was not credited to him, and not knowing it was not credited until the morning it ended. She thought about Nora in the lobby, with compass under her arm, looking at the display case, asking in her honest and uncomplicated voice whether her father's name was on any of those. She thought, the strongest case for a person is usually made by the one who is not trying to make it. She thought, a child who has been raised a certain way will simply state the thing clearly, not as an argument, as a fact, because to her it is a fact, and the fact of it lands differently than any argument would. She went home. She made coffee. She opened the next folder in her queue and started reading. Marcus made pancakes that morning. It was a Saturday protocol, not every Saturday, but the ones where there was no particular urgency, where the morning had nothing to extract from it except the morning itself. Nora sat at the table in her pajamas, compass on the seat beside her, watching her father work the griddle with the same attention she gave things she found worth studying. He had his back to her. He was monitoring the edges of the batter circles, with the patience of someone who knew that impatience was the only thing that ruined a pancake. "Bah," she said. Did they say your name right this time?" He turned the first pancake. The edge was clean, even. "Yes," he said. Nora picked up compass and settled him more upright against the table's edge, orienting him toward the griddle as though he too should witness the pancakes. She considered something. "Is Compass going to like it?" she said. "The new place." Marcus looked at the griddle. He thought about Bay 7. He thought about the alignment geometry he had drawn from memory. He thought about 23 outputs, 4 years, a records amendment made without ceremony. He thought about a cactus arrangement in a glass panel somewhere on the other side of the city, and a woman who had stood at a conference table in the specific silence after a door closed and had said out loud, to no one in particular, what she had seen. "I think so," he said. "More people can see him there." Nora found this satisfactory. She set compass back down. She looked at the griddle. "They're ready," she said. Marcus turned them. She was right. Outside the kitchen window, the Clintonville morning was conducting its usual operations. A neighbor walking a dog along the sidewalk. The first mowers of the season. Starting somewhere 2 blocks over, the particular early summer light that came through the east windows of the apartment and pooled on the table with the specific warmth of something that had been traveling a long time to arrive. Compass sat at the edge of the table, with his single felt eye, and his yellow-threaded repair, and his 4 years of being carried into every room Nora considered worth entering. Marcus set the pancakes on the table. He sat down. Nora poured the syrup with the careful precision she had inherited from someone, applied to everything she did. She cut the first piece. She ate. The morning asked nothing of either of them. This is a work of fiction. All names, characters, companies, institutions, and events portrayed in this story are entirely fictional and are the product of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, or to actual events or organizations is purely coincidental. This story was created for entertainment and inspirational purposes only. If this story stayed with you, subscribe and share it with someone who has ever been underestimated. Every week, we tell the stories of the people the world walked past too quickly. They were worth stopping for.